Good afternoon. Had obviously a very eventful week. Got the major economic development legislation through today in a vote that was pretty close to what I thought it was, but even better than I thought it was going to be. Excited about the opportunities that await Oklahoma with that. And we have a deadline week we're approaching next week to get House bills heard on the floor, Senate bills on the House side. So it's going to be a busy week next week. Expect some late nights more than likely, and look forward to any questions you may have.
I have a question. Speaker McCall has a bill that's running through your chambers, made out of committee. I'm guessing it'll be heard next week. That would give teachers, allow parents to pay teachers $1,000 anonymously. I wondered what your thoughts were on the bill, because I know it's kind of facing some criticism.
But it hasn't faced criticism from me. It's just I have not even been in any meetings on that bill. I'm aware of it. As I think Senator Pugh is the Senate author, if I'm not mistaken. I've heard different perspectives on that, but I haven't weighed in on it one way or another, and I'm not going to change that today because I still haven't even read the actual bill yet.
I usually ask you about tax relief, tax cuts, and I'll do the same again today, but I'm just curious if sort of the rebate fund that y'all created today, or sent legislation to the governor to create today, does that change the conversation around providing tax cuts this year?
It does change the dialogue some, since we wanted to front load the cash on that and make sure that we were responsible and good stewards of the money. That obviously changes some of the dynamics of the conversation around any tax relief we're able to perform. So yes, it does change it some.
Do you think tax relief would still be possible this year, or do you just have to be more careful about how you do it so it's not, coming after a $700 million hit, say a $300, $400 million hit?
The latter rather than the former.
Okay, so it's still part of the conversation.
Yeah.
How are budget negotiations going?
I saw an update from someone that we were getting close and we were going to have a deal on Monday. That was not somebody who's been in the room. I was greeted when I got off the elevator with someone showing me their tweet that they get updated at lobbyists, and I found it laughable. And so we're having good, productive conversations. Obviously, the bill that we just took care of today was still hanging in the balance and taking most of the oxygen out of the room in conversations. But our budget teams have been meeting even before session. They've made tremendous progress, but to insinuate that we're anywhere close to getting finalized would be a misnomer.
Governor Stitt said that both you and or Speaker McCall had traveled with him on some of these economic development trips. I don't know if you've signed an NDA. Is there anything you can tell us about where you went, what you saw?
I signed an NDA.
Okay. Well, then you're no
On
good.
all of them?
I signed an NDA.
About the pump?
Do what?
Is it about the pump?
No, I didn't sign an NDA about the pump.
Okay.
You can ask me all you want.
I was curious to take it back just a week or so. You would, or even longer than that, I suppose, you made a change at the chairperson of the Judiciary Committee,
Mm-hmm.
and then one thing led to another, and the House Judiciary Chairman declined to hear a dozen or so bills and made some statements about the Senate Judiciary Chairwoman. I was curious your reaction to all that, and has that been a problem, or has that been worked through?
Severely disappointed in the House Judiciary Chair and his actions and the actions of his committee and those members that came in to watch the circus. Senator Daniels has done a tremendous job as Chair of Judiciary. When I put Senator Howard in as that chair, we were working on JCAR and trying to fully implement that. Have not fully implemented JCAR. Want to make sure we continue to work down that hall or that angle. Senator Daniels has put in a ton of work on that, but when she came to me this interim and wanted to lead the effort on JCAR, I said, you can't be both Judiciary Chair and JCAR Chair. And so we made a decision to put her as chair of JCAR when we hit some stumbling blocks with trying to get that fully implemented, I felt it was right to put her back there. We've got Senator Howard leading the JCAR efforts along with Representative O'Donnell on the House side now. They're making some progress. But the show of House Judiciary of killing all those bills and defaming Senator Daniels was uncalled for, unprofessional, and we absolutely have her back, and we'll continue to advocate for her strongly.
Am I hearing you right that the change between judiciary chairpersons didn't have anything to do with legislation that Senator Howard voted against?
There were several things that went into that decision. I would say 5 points in particular. I'm not going to go through each one of them. But Senator Howard and I had a very frank conversation about it, as well as Senator Daniels and I made a decision that I thought was best for the Senate, but it wasn't a decision on, I know what the insinuation is, that the vote on 1647. That was part of the equation, but there were 5 points to the equation.
One of the others being the SGR 47, I think it was, the ballot question on judiciary.
I'm not going to go into all the details on it. Senator Howard is an extremely valuable member of our caucus. He is one of the most talented members in the legislature. He is chair of our joint committee on tribal relations. He's the chief presiding officer, and now he's the chair of JCAR and the vice chair of finance. He is one of the most utilized members of the Senate in all areas, and his talent affords him that right. He's extremely gifted and someone who I consider a very close friend.
When Senator Jim Inhofe announced he was going to retire, there was talk that maybe you would run for the U.S. Senate. Obviously, you're not running for the U.S. Senate, and I'm very late on this question, but I'm just curious. You always struck me as somebody who might end up back in Washington, D.C., and so did you give any thought to running for the U.S. Senate? Or?
No, I did not. My kids are 14, 11, and 10. My caucus knows that when the congressional race a couple of years ago, we talked about it, and it just wasn't the right time, and there's nothing right about this time. I find it ironic. A lot of people, say go back to D.C. I worked for Tom Coburn here in Oklahoma. Oklahoma is where I've lived my whole life. I did an internship in D.C. when he was in the U.S. House, but my work for Tom Coburn, which I'm proud of, and sometimes I miss because you get out in the community more, even more, but I was Oklahoma-based. I've always been Oklahoma-based.
I think the House sent over something like $1.2, $1.4 billion of impact on various bills, and yet, has also talked about the need to be fiscally conservative and that sort of stuff. As you whittle things down, do you have a sense of what their priorities are, what priorities you've articulated to them? How do we get from $1.4 billion in requests in an election year down to where we need to be?
The way our process works with deadlines and having to meet deadlines, you have to progress a lot of things to get to the end, to see what you can actually afford and what makes the most sense. So I don't begrudge anyone for advancing things. We'll have continued dialogue through the budget negotiations and through conversations with the Speaker and myself and other leadership members to figure that out. It's like we do every year. Yes, there's obviously the price tag if you did everything that we sent them and everything they sent us. Couldn't do that, and so we'll be winnowing it down.
Where do we stand on state questions? There was a ton of them, probably would have filled up 3 ballots, right?
Mm-hmm.
So where do we stand on those negotiations? What's looking like it's going to make the ballot and what's not?
Well, the same, I hate to repeat myself, and it's a completely new question, so I'm not saying it's repetitive, but the same answer. The auction, for me, was taken out. I was so focused on trying to get school choice done there for a few weeks, and then so focused on trying to land this economic development opportunity and try to put us in a position that those conversations are all probably coming to a head next week or the week after, but very soon. we continue to progress those. I continue to advocate strongly for the ones that I care about, as well as other people obviously are advocating, but there's been no decisions on which ones will advance beyond this point.
What about 1647? Is it gonna come back from the dead?
I believe passionately in giving chances to kids that are trapped in situations, and so my passion has not waned. 1647 itself will not be resurrected, but the idea, the concept, trying to change and transform family trees is something that I want to accomplish before I get out of this building. I'll do it. If an opportunity presents itself, I will advance something to that end, but I'm not going to try to hammer that exact issue through this session.
I've asked you this sort of on a different note related to the Healthcare Authority, which...
That exact issue as it was prescribed in that bill, if I can get a modicum of it, I will continue to push.
I'm just wondering, in light of some of the stories and some of what's come to light about this deal between the Oklahoma Department of Tourism and Swadley's, I mean, do you think that the legislature needs to go back to having more oversight of the Department of Tourism?
Well, you know, we have a tremendous asset in LOFT. If you didn't know what that Legislative Office of Fiscal Transparency is, you heard me say over and over 3 or 4 years ago when we were doing it. Yeah, I know you're familiar, but I like to keep the brand alive. But LOFT has proven an extremely valuable tool. In this scenario, also in scenarios, you know, it's not always showing problems. It also shows things like Oklahoma Promise, where it's actually delivering on what we say to taxpayers it's going to deliver. So it's provided a tremendous asset to legislators to make more informed decisions. So on the oversight issue, I think that we have an excellent tool that has yet to be fully developed in LOFT. Start with that. On the issue itself of the Swadleys and tourism issue, I am concerned about it. I am monitoring it closely, but as there's an audit going to take place or taking place, and a district attorney who's now engaged, I'm going to sit back, not relax, watch it, and see if there needs to be anything to tighten up.
LOFT is obviously a little bit limited. They come in after the fact and look through things. Do you think the legislature is doing enough to provide active oversight of agencies? I mean, obviously the Swadley's thing have been going on for a while, and you know, there've been some other financial, for lack of a better word, boondoggles and other state agencies in recent years as well.
Which ones are you talking about?
Well, there were some concerns about the health department and some of their spending, some of the pandemic spending, stuff like that.
Okay. You know, with all the moving parts with CARES and ARPA, there's a lot of federal dollars flowing in as well. Legislative oversight is something I believe deeply in and will continue to bolster. I think we do a pretty good job, but we can always improve.
You said once LOFT is fully realized. What do you mean by that? How is it not fully realized yet?
Well, it's still, you know, we're doing a lot, they're doing a lot of these quick action reports. I'm talking about when we start doing deeper dives in other areas, and the quick action reports are what you've seen, but there's a lot of work going on too that's a much longer longitudinal study of issues within state government. So I'm talking about just giving enough time to finish some of those long-term studies. We had a real lack of information to operate off of before LOFT. We're not operating with full information. I don't know if you'll ever know exactly 100% of the potential consequences of anything we take on here. But we're operating eyes wider open than they were before.
Back to education very quickly. Let's take, to the extent that you can, the school choice question, policy question out of it. There's always discussions about how do we improve the education system, address a teacher shortage. Some people want a teacher pay raise, some people want more money for the formula. I know you guys have done a lot in the past, but what
was that you just said?
I know you guys have done a lot in the past.
I just wanted to hear it. Thank you. Yeah.
I recall the revenue bill being signed into law before the teacher walkout. But anyway,
Yeah. We recall the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, funny. I get in fights about that all the time still. Anyway, I was here. What are we doing now? Because okay, a couple years ago, sure, but what are we doing now?
We can't ever take our foot off the pedal there. We can't ever land on the aircraft carrier and declare victory there. It's an ever evolving situation, ever evolving needs. And so we've got to make sure that we stay competitive regionally for the long term. You can't go a decade or so between paying attention to that. We're very focused on it. You've seen us continue to invest there. But it's hard for me to separate the two. I think reform and investment are both needed. And so you'll see us focused on both of those, trying to make sure that we have opportunity for kids and oversight while still staying up on investments. You may not, hopefully you don't see the big splash like you did a few years ago where we had to make a huge investment to catch up. Hopefully we can keep it up incrementally to where we're in a very competitive place regionally and nationally and continue to improve. Talk to my colleagues from around the country in different organizations I'm involved in, and it's not unique to Oklahoma. It was obviously magnified here, but that's a continual struggle that leaders across the country are trying to find. More money is not the only answer. It's part of having a conversation of trying to get revenue there. That's obviously part of the equation, but it's not the whole equation.
I'm sorry. Do you have any thoughts on Senator Rader's 1,000-plus page sentencing reform bill sort of just dying a quiet death over in the House? I know it passed out of your guys' chamber pretty easily. I mean, there were obviously some very vocal opponents to it, but it seemed like there was a lot of effort put into that measure.
Senator Rader has been a real champion on that cause. You know, I was extremely involved in it myself for a number of years. I was extremely involved in DHS and Pinnacle, and then you just kind of hand that off to really competent people within our caucus. And Senator Rader has taken the ball and run with it and done an exceedingly good job. That's not an easy conversation to have when you look at negative ads on our governor about criminal justice issues. At the same time, we're trying to run and continue to advance that. We don't operate in a vacuum here, and so we hear those same things. Constituents get concerned, all those type of things. We're still very committed to making sure we modernize our criminal justice system, and we'll continue to try to achieve that, and in a very responsible manner that keeps public safety front and center.
What is your take on those ads and how they do or do not affect the policy effort, right? I mean, you've got members all over the state who probably took a few years for people to get them toward a position of, hey, we want to do something on criminal justice reform. What's the impact or potential impact of those ads?
Well, there's a real impact. I don't know how long term it is, but you know, the Willie Horton ads I still remember in a presidential race, and that set us back a while. There's a horrific event in Chickasha after that deal. It wasn't emblematic of most of the people that got a second chance, but those type of things. We're human beings. We also have emotion, and we hear from constituents. My own daughter, when she came back from my parents' house, said, "Dad, did Kevin Stitt really do what that ad said?" I said, It's somebody that doesn't want him to be governor anymore, and they went into, I still haven't seen the ad. She talked about a heart and all this other stuff that she had seen in it, and so I was a little bit horrified that my parents let her watch that. I love my parents; they're the most awesome people in the world, but I was a little bit taken back that they let her watch that ad. There's an impact. We all hear that, and you know, half my body's up for election. All of the speakers is, and so they're campaigning among that same electorate that the ads are trying to hit.
You should talk to Janelle. Her little ones are asking questions about the ads, wanting to know what cannibalism is.
Oh yeah, no, I got that question. I had to define what cannibalism was to my daughter, which was not the funnest conversation.
I mean, do you think mean, is that well, I guess you already answered, but it's just an interest, I hadn't even considered that you as a parent would have to talk to your child about cannibalism because of a political act. It just strikes me
Yeah.
as odd.
It is, you know, my kids see stuff. My kids saw that I'm a heartless person that doesn't like public education too. And so they had to come back and ask me about that. And I said, no, your dad actually gave the largest pay raise in state history, advocated for the revenue to do it, and believes deeply in public education, but also wants to make sure other people aren't left behind. I get those conversations from my kids all the time. Neighbors have signs in their yard against my bill, and so their kids play with my kids. They're man, we disagree politically, but they're good, fine people that I try to show love to. So my kids hear that.
Did they leave the signs up even though the bills?
Oh, it's still there. Yeah, it's still there. It's still there. But, you know, their kids still play with my kids. I still talk to them still. Issues that separate us, I mean, we're all human beings that have the same wants and desires for our kids. So I get a little philosophical on it, but I don't get caught up on if people disagree with me on one thing or another.
There was a report that you may have gotten, I think statutorily, you were supposed to have gotten it, but whether it arrived or not, after last year's Grand River Dam Authority legislative task force that made a recommendation of increasing the bonding capacity. On the heels of what was done today, with the inducements to try to get the company to move to the Mid-America Industrial Park, one of the main selling points is affordable energy. Has there been any decision or discussion about whether to entertain that recommendation?
There's conversations around it. That's been an issue well before this. It didn't play into the discussions on economic development around there one iota. But it is a conversation out here. I'm still looking for why do they need the increase. I've seen the study, I've seen the recommendation. That'll be a conversation for us to have as we move forward.
I think it didn't install, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Well, nothing, it ain't May 27th yet, so what's the
I've always been clear that I think that's a part of a larger discussion on the gaming compacts. And, you know, ball and dice and that got rolled out around the same time. I've been very privately and publicly consistent that if we want to have a conversation on that, we need to have a more global conversation on the compacts writ large.
so we shouldn't expect anything on JCAP or anything like that. That conversation's not being had.
I'm rolling it out on Monday with the budget too. No, like I said, it's not May 27th yet, but I want to see a larger discussion around that. All right. Thank you all.
Budget